In this video we will be going over the second type of BCI actuator that we build here. This BCI actuator comes with a conversion kit, and that is packaged with it. It comes zip tied up to one of these up here. And we will be going through the steps on how to install this. This conversion kit is so that we can add a potentiometer to the BCI actuator. Alright, so inside of that conversion kit you will find all of these different small bags and pieces. We've got a bag here that comes with all the necessary screws and washers, as well as a larger black gear that gets placed in there, installed in there. Comes with a small brass gear also, and this gear actually will need to be drilled out to a 1/4 inch size so that it can fit over the potentiometer that we use. There is also another baggie here that's going to have 3 terminals, and we will be using the numbers 16, 17, and 18 on those terminals. There is a bracket here that will have the potentiometer seated on it, and finally some standoffs, and these will also be installed inside the BCI actuator. So those are all of the components that will be found inside of that conversion kit. These are the tools that you'll need to be able to install the conversion kit into the BCI actuator. Starting off, we've got a ratchet with a 10mm socket on the end of it, 1/4 inch drill bit, and that is for drilling out the brass gear that comes in the conversion kit, a 3/8 drill bit, and that's used to drill out the washer that goes onto the potentiometer that will be installed into the BCI actuator. Then we've got a 5/64 Allen wrench that gets used, a small flathead, a small Phillips, a small crescent wrench, a 4mm hex socket, and then a 5/16 hex drive. The cover has been taken off of the BCI actuator. At this point we haven't added anything from the conversion kit yet. If we look up over here, there's room on the DIN rail for the terminals that we will be adding. If we look a little bit closer in here, you can see down right there, up there, that's where our standoffs are going to be installed. That larger black gear will be placed right over on top of here. Alright, so we have added most of the pieces actually for the conversion kit. If we look up here, we've got our 3 terminals, 16, 17, and 18 that have been added. Come down here, we'll see we've got our 2 standoffs that have been added in there as well. The black larger gear has been added on. And finally, our potentiometer has been built up to this point. We've got the brass gear on the back side there. Everything has been seated down and tightened up so that we know it's exactly where we want it. And then our washer there is being held in place. And eventually, the final piece to put on there is going to be that guy right there. It'll get screwed on, and that will be everything that needs to be installed for the conversion kit itself, and then we can start the testing phase. Alright, so all of the components from the conversion kit have now been installed into the BCI actuator. That final bracket has been installed. If we look along the side here, we'll see that brass gear. You want to make sure that is seated properly onto that black gear that was also installed. And then if we follow the wires coming out of the potentiometer, follow that up, just route it around, and those have been installed into terminals 16, 17, and 18 with their respective colors red, yellow, and black. And then we also have a multimeter that is going into terminals 16 and 17, and then there is also a jumper going from 17 to 18. That multimeter over here, we've got it set up. It's in the fully closed position at the moment. and that is giving us a reading that is consistent with that. And then also we have wired up here our actuator switch, and that's going into the ground. Then we have terminals 1, 2, and 3, and the wires on the actuator switch are also labeled to make sure that the proper wire is going into the proper terminal, and that actuator switch is right here. So once all of that has been installed, you can plug in the actuator switch and begin the testing procedures. All of that wiring that I just went over, that is on a clipboard in electrical. It goes over each one of those steps, where the wires need to go, how the BCI actuator needs to be wired up, and so please use that as a reference as well as you're going through and testing out these BCI actuators. The BCI actuator has now been calibrated so that using the actuator switch, if we take a look here at our multimeter, I'll open it all the way, begin opening. You'll notice that internally the gears are starting to move, everything's moving as it should, and we should be stopping on the multimeter around 95 plus or minus 1 on either side, and we were stopping at 94.9 or 95 exactly right there. So same thing, turn the actuator switch, begins to close, make sure, check everything is moving properly as it should, and it is. We go back to our multimeter, and that should be stopping at 5 plus or minus 1, and there it is, stops at 5.1. Alright, now in the process of calibrating this, when you get the potentiometer hooked up, more often than not there will need to be a decent amount of calibration that's done internally. So the way that you calibrate that is by depressing on these slots here and then turning to the left or to the right. What that does, you'll notice, is that there are different cams on the inside here, and they all have different colors. There are rings around each one of these slots that correspond to those internal cams, and you'll need to adjust those left and right to get it to fall within the range that you want it to fall within. Now, one thing that you want to make sure you don't do is come up against the internal stops that are part of the BCI actuator themselves down underneath here. There are some internal stops that you do not want to get close to. If you do get close to those and start running up against them, that is a quick way to burn up the BCI actuator. So right now we are in the fully closed position. If we look at the cams on the inside, you'll see it says closed there, and when it goes fully closed, you should hear a double click from the black and gray cams. Now if we manually start to move this even more closed, we want a good 4 to 5 turns before we start hitting the internal stop. Now there it is, I've hit the internal stop, there's a significant amount of resistance, and we're about 4 to 5 turns away from that internal stop. So that is where we want to be. Now likewise, on the upper end, if we open this all the way, there we go, make sure everything's moving as it should, and it is. We're going to open this up all the way, and we're going to make sure that we are 4 to 5 turns away from the internal stop in the fully open position. So now, if we look in there, can't really see it from that angle, there is another set of cams that are for the fully open position. We've got it fully open, it's at 95 on the multimeter. Now we'll start to turn it even further open, make sure we get 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There we go, yeah. So about 4.5 there. And that is a good distance away from that internal stop. So again, you want to make sure that the cams bring the BCI actuator to a stop before it hits that internal stop that is existing in there. And once you've reached that range there and you've got a good distance between the open and closed positions, then you're good to go. Have somebody QC it and it's done. The last step is to get it QC'd by the shop manager, and this has been QC'd by the shop manager, as you can see there. I've removed all the extra wiring and gotten it to a point that the only thing that needs to be done is to put the cover back on. Make sure that you include all of the paperwork that came originally with it. That's what this is here. Also, one of these labels needs to be put in there, and once that is done and it's been QC'd, you can put the cover back on and get it to shipping and receiving, and you're good to go. There is the final product. Everything is back together. It's been built up and QC'd, and this will wrap up our BCI Actuator video.